Now I am going to request respected Kristofer LUNDBERG. He is from Sweden. He is a Swedish human rights activist and journalist. And nowadays he is working with Save the Children NGO. So we are thankful to you for your presence over here. Respected Kristofer LUNDBERG, sir. The floor is yours.
Yeah, Balochistan has once again seen a recent wave of protest from Gwadar to Quetta for the right of the Baloch people and against enforced disappearance. Yet the protests and rallies in Balochistan, even if they have a mass character, don't get any coverage in the mainstream or international media. Human rights violations carried out in Balochistan by the Pakistani government should draw concern and criticism internationally, but is met with silence. Compare the media cover, political and economic actions against Russia after the Putin attack on Ukraine with the silence about the Pakistani occupation of Balochistan. In 2021, the Pakistan government intensified its effort to control the media and curtail dissent. Authorities harassed and at times detained journalists and other members of the civil society for criticizing government officials and policies. Violent attacks on members of the media also continue, Human Rights Watch reported. And they continued. A climate of fear impedes media coverage of abuses by both government security forces and militant groups. Journalists who face threats and attacks have increasingly resorted to self-censorship. Media have come under pressure from authorities not to criticize government institutions. Balochistan is the world's most dangerous place for journalists. It is also one of the world's most closed places where no international human rights or humanitarian organizations can work. Therefore, the testimonies of those who manage to get out is so important. But at the same time as repression against the Baloch people is taking place, those who flee are not guaranteed safety and asylum in the European countries. I will give you a quote. They undressed me naked, they crushed my ankles, they broke my fingers. I have 32 stitches on my back, scars on my face and on my head of torture. Only someone who experienced this can understand. These were the worst days of my life, but I survived. But my 2 uncles and 3 cousins, they didn't. They were murdered. This quote was from Said Baloch, and he was denied asylum in both Sweden and Norway. The European states are therefore not credible representatives of human rights. According to the EU Aid Explorer website, EU financial assistance to Pakistan amounted to more than 4 billion euro between 2014 and 2019. The EU is Pakistan's second most important trading partner after China and accounted for 14.3% of Pakistan's total trade in 2020 and accounted for 28% of Pakistan's total export. Dozens of people are losing their lives on a daily basis in killings committed by the Pakistani security forces. The victims' families give horrifying descriptions of tortured bodies found without hearts, lungs, or their eyeballs removed. And we know that Balochistan has been occupied by Pakistan since 1948, followed by a brutal repression pointed at the people in the region. And this is in order to enable the exploitation of its natural resources. While the region has been robbed of its natural resources, it has been left behind and poor, with the population living long below the poverty line. All through the region is rich of gold, gas, coal. The population is forced to travel 700 kilometers to the nearest hospital in Karachi due to the lack of health care. According to the Pakistan Health Democrat Survey, there are 3 times as many women who die in childbirth in Balochistan than in all other regions in Pakistan combined. The struggle for democratic freedoms and rights is therefore just as much about the struggle for democratic control of the country's natural resources, which should be invested in infrastructure and welfare. Natural resources from Balochistan have instead been used to develop other parts of Pakistan and China for years. China and Pakistan economic cooperation through CPEC is now worsening the conflict in Balochistan. In the trace of the China-Pakistan economic corridor follows militarization, colonialization, occupation, and exploitation. People are arrested, kidnapped, murdered, and disappeared in tens of thousands. And according to the Human Rights Watch, human rights abuses in Balochistan have reached epidemic proportions. And the current situation in Balochistan is critical, even in historical context. The armed conflict has worsened, and the area is further militarized in the wake of the Chinese involvement and its agreement with Pakistan. The Pakistani Security Service has strengthened its military presence in the trace of CPEC and deepening their kill and dump policy. Meanwhile, China has been strongly pushing to the European Union to invest in the CPEC sister project One Belt, One Road initiative. And since CPEC started, Balochistan has hit the worst form of human rights violations. When CPEC was launched, the local Baloch community in Gwadar lacked access of water, electricity, and other basic facilities. And they still don't have those basic necessities, despite the influx of billions of dollars from the Chinese investment. About 100,000 people are still without clean drinking water in Gwadar port town. And rather than lifting up the local population, the wave of investment has had the opposite effect. In the wake of the development work, locals have started losing their sources of livelihood. Many, particularly the fishermen, have become jobless due to the increasingly security presence for the port town. Protesters have therefore closed the highway connecting Gwadar to Karachi, and the government answered by sending 5,500 riot police to Gwadar, where security personnel already has been a common sight for years. Earlier, thousands of women gathered in the coast town for a bigger rally, for the biggest rally in a week-long series of demonstrations demanding basic civil facilities. And the presence of Chinese troops in Balochistan destabilized the entire region. And at the request of China, Pakistan has established a paramilitary force to protect the CPEC for a period of 20 years. And the Pakistani Special Battalion in the area at the moment is more than 15,000 troops to guard Chinese investment. Death squads carrying out target attacks against political and human rights activists. Mass graves have been found with assassinated activists, lawyers, and journalists. And Human Rights Watch, they report that between 1999 and 2015 alone, more than 20,000 Baloch have disappeared. And today, it's in total more than 47,000 people that are missing in Balochistan. The number of disappearance of people in Pakistan in total is around 70,000 people who is enforced disappearance. The Pakistani EC agency is responsible for enforced disappearance of thousands of these human rights activists. In spite of Pakistan's large and well-organized military strength, they have failed to crush the people's desire to peace, freedom, and independence. The Frontier Corps, ISI agency, and Islamist groups have a decade-long action of pick and dump policy in which Baloch human rights activists, political activists, students, lawyers, and doctors are being picked up, disappeared, tortured, mutilated, and killed. In November and December last year, Baloch student at University of Balochistan in Quetta was protesting against the abduction of 2 of the students from the university. The student organized sittings and occupations of the university, and the protest started just after enforced disappearance of 2 of their student colleagues. The university campus have a heavy presence of security forces, including the paramilitary force Frontier Corps. And paramilitary force are common sight in Balochistan, even in educational institutions. And that's also why students of Balochistan have been in the forefront of protests in the major events in the past few years. And many Baloch student activists express concern of the mass abductions of students, fearing that the security forces are looking to erase the progress of that the movement have made over the past year. 2 days ago, it was the International Women's Day, and it gathered millions of women on the streets globally. In Balochistan, they were surrounded by police. And I would say that at the forefront of the civil resistance in Balochistan are women. They are also hit hard by the tyranny. Repeated cases of abductions of Baloch women have taken place continuously. The women of Balochistan play an active role in the resistance movement. They march together, they hold mass meetings, and they have public speeches. And this must be seen as a strength in a country with such a clear patriarchal and conservative structures. Their masked faces has become synonymous with the resistance. And this has also led to an increased violence and repressions from the state against the women. So Baloch women, they bear the burden of a dual oppression, both for being Baloch and being a woman. Student activists, especially women, fear not only for their own safety, but also for the safety of their families. But with the recent rise in enforced disappearance, the Baloch women are filling the gap created in political scene, including leading protests against the enforced disappearance. And according to a report released by the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan, there has been an increase in cases of Baloch women being targeted by the security forces. Baloch women and even children are being detained by force in Pakistan army camps. Some of them get released after a few days, but before that they are harassed and tortured. During 2022's first 3 months, we have seen 28 children being enforced disappeared. And there is a long history of enforced disappearance in Balochistan. Enforced disappearance has been used as a tool by the Pakistani state to silence the Baloch people. And Pakistan is now practicing the same method of enforced disappearance abroad, in the Baloch diaspora as well. As we heard before, 2 years ago, the Baloch journalist and activist Saeed Hussein was disappeared from Sweden on March the 2nd, 2020. His body was later found in the river of Uppsala on 1st of May 2020. And Saeed Hussein was a significant voice of the Baloch in the diaspora. And he used to work on human rights issues in Balochistan and reporting of enforced disappearance. And according to a report issued by the Reporter Without Borders in Sweden, they suspected that Saeed Hussein might have been abducted by the Pakistani ISI. We also know about Karima Baloch, the first woman chairperson of the BSO, who mysteriously was found dead in Canada. So, because of lack of time, I will not speak much more, but just want to say that we urge the UN to address human rights violations in Balochistan, and we can urge the international community to listen and to pay attention. But I think that the only one who is able to liberate Balochistan are the Baloch masses, and they need our support.
Thank you, respected Kristofer LUNDBERG. Thank you, sir, for presenting actually the whole issues in such a detailed way, in such a nice way, that showing the data and also, giving references of different organizations, including the international organizations, that what are the concerns, how they speak about Pakistan, and what is the reality, and what is the number, and how they are being suffering over there, and showing your solidarity with us. We are highly thankful to you for your presence, and I'm highly thankful to you for your such a detailed presentation about Pakistan.